I am joined today by a local artist again. I feel recently throughout some of these we've disappeared around Manchester, Wales, Scotland, but here we are back in Cambridgeshire, and I'm delighted that I'm joined by Hester. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise. Now you confuse me a little bit with your music because there is a quite an uplifting sound to your lyrics and the music behind it. But there's it's kind of smattering of melancholic doom and gloom in there too. But then you're a folk artist, so there needs to be. Um, but I mean, and I guess I would describe you as someone who is, true to your traditional roots of folk music, but very much a 2020 sound to it as well. How would you describe your own I know artists hate being pigeonholed, but describe your own music?
I'm trying to get better at doing this because I think that it's not enough just to say, "Oh, I hate that question." Um, so I'm a singer-songwriter primarily, but I don't really believe that's a genre because I
Oh,
think people can be singer-songwriters in any genre. It's acoustic music within the very broad folk genre, so maybe alternative folk, maybe popular folk is what you might call it. And I'd say it's melodically driven. It's about storytelling. Um, but I think I'm a bit of an imposter in terms of folk because I think I did it the other way round, if that makes sense. So I grew up with a lot of pop and rock music, a bit of country to be fair. Um,
which you can hear.
had classical training, and so folk became this kind of happy medium. I mean, I did, I think as a child we went to see Waterson Carthy and Kate Rusby and people like that, but I'm not from a family of folkies at all. I just, in the end, I think people kept telling me that's where my voice sounds right, because I sing in my own accent and I've got fairly sort of pure vocal tone, and yeah, I just wasn't ever going to be a sort of dancing pop star, I guess.
I think it's the storytelling that stands out. I love folk music because it is such a broad genre.
Yeah.
I know from a listener's perspective and a fan, I absolutely wouldn't call you a folk imposter, that's for sure.
I
Um,
think I'm just careful with the term because I think rightly so, people who work within trad folk are very protective of that. And it does start to seem to be stretched beyond recognition after a certain point. But folk just means people, doesn't it? So it's the music of people and communities wherever you are.
I don't think I've heard anyone sum it up better. So we're in the middle of July. How's lockdown been for you from a creative point of view?
That's a funny one, really. I think in terms of the stage I'm at with I'm working on an album. In terms of that, I was already in the mindset of recording and promoting and that kind of thing. So it's been really creative in that some friends of mine put together a music video for me. I got to be a kind of creative director for that. But I don't know that I was planning to do lots of writing anyway. But what I have done is I've been a mentor for a community arts project, writing songs, folk songs about North Cambridge. So that's been really creative. And I think I've got to the point with that now where helping other people write their songs, I'm getting a little bit restless and jealous and I want to write songs again. So I think
That's,
coming around a circular way has been good for me.
so I'm fascinated by that. So firstly, can you tell us more about the project so that if people want to go and search and look it up, where they can go?
Yeah, so it's called the Cambridge North Folk Song Project. Um, and the lead artist is a woman called Emily Peasgood, who is mostly a sort of sound artist and composer, I guess, but knows her folk music really well. And the idea is that we're putting together a modern day folk songbook of songs about the CB4 postal area where I happen to live. So, sort of Arbury, Chesterton, people who know Cambridge, the North Cambridge basically. And, it was all supposed to be big workshops and big rooms and very collective. And as it happens, I haven't met Emily in person. I haven't met Bob Hines, the other folk sort of mentor. Haven't met any of the participants in real life. But it's lent itself quite nicely to Zoom sessions. So essentially, my role is mentoring people through the process of writing a song. Some people are experienced and they just want someone to sort of give them a bit of an editor's view. Other people have never written a song before, and it's really fun to see them realise that that's something they're capable of.
So, sorry, I just realised that rudely my phone had pinged during your answer. Then there you go. That's authentic
Oh,
broadcasting
I
for you.
didn't
Sorry
hear
about
it.
that.
Hopefully it won't be that loud.
Well, that's all right. If no one else heard it, I've just brought it to everyone's attention instead.
Yeah.
So, because you're, I mean, the idea of writing a song, it's something I've not done before, and quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure where I'd start. So, I guess if this is a two-part question, one of which is, what would your advice be for anyone who hasn't, and in terms of that, how would you get that ball rolling for them? And well, actually, no, let me ask that one first because the second one is slightly more detailed.
So say that again. How would I get the ball
So,
rolling?
so if someone hadn't written a song before, how would you get them to start that process? What would your advice be?
Well, to be honest, I've been drawing less on my musician knowledge and more on my teaching knowledge. I'm trained to teach English as a second language, which I think is a great training for any kind of teaching, because if you're teaching people how to speak a language, then you have to draw on a lot of drawing and dancing and mime and all sorts of things. So yeah, with one person, I basically gave him a kind of what we might call scaffolding in education. So I sort of said, oh, I want your verse to have this many lines, your chorus to have this many lines, do one verse on this aspect, one verse on this aspect. But I offered him three alternative ways of doing it, because that one, when you read it, you might go, oh, that's a bit restrictive. So then there's another framework that has fewer prompts, and then a third one that has even fewer. Because I find if I've got a sort of unfamiliar task, I want someone to give me every detail of instruction. But then once I get started, I might put that to one side. So yeah, I think for me, it's kind of enabling people to recognize what they can already do. And when it comes to music and songwriting, most people, they have a bit of a command of language. They know words, and they know words they think sound good together. And then the musical side, it just depends. Most people I'm working with have learnt other people's songs, so they know what chord sequences work. And some people don't, and they're just listening to music and saying, does this sound like a decent melody? And if they haven't any idea, then I can provide the melody.
Have you ever written a song for anyone else?
Ooh, it's a very good question. I haven't written a song for anyone else. I did have two experiences I could mention. One was I grew up in Milton Keynes, and I was part of a project called Great War Remembered MK, which was sort of doing a collective artistic history of the area during World War One, because Milton Keynes is so often accused of not having any history, basically. And so it was through a great organisation called Living Archive, we got to listen back to interviews that they'd done in the 1980s with people who remembered the First World War. And so that was a song that I ended up singing, but it was very much, it felt kind of like a commission to honour a certain thing. And the other experience, I went on a really good songwriting retreat in Hebden Bridge, and the tutors were Samantha Parton and Catherine Williams. And one of our tasks was to write a song for a kind of upcoming pop star. And that was really liberating. I never tried pitching it to anyone, but...
but the reason why I asked that question is because, as you said at the start as well, you're very much a storyteller. Mm-hmm. So your songs are drawn on your own experiences of life. So when you're writing a song for someone else, I wondered if that would therefore become a barrier.
Yeah, I think it could be quite liberating, to be honest. I like to have a sort of clear stimulus for a song. So if that was, somebody else's voice or somebody else's style, I think in some ways that could help me to get started. It might stop me from getting to the same emotional depth sometimes. But as it happens with the project, I'm kind of, all the people I'm working with are doing most of the work themselves. So I really enjoy that, stepping back and being more of a kind of enabler and a facilitator rather than doing much of the writing.
So we have 10 questions to go through. I haven't asked any of them yet. So let's crack on. These 10 questions are taken from the end of Inside the Actors studio. And it's just a chance. I know there's an ironic element to this, which is, it's a get chance to learn from some of my favorite singer-songwriters. But arguably I can just do that by listening to your songs. So this is to understand a bit more from a different perspective. So the first question, and you've suggested that I make myself comfortable for the answer to this, but what's your favorite word?
Okay, this was very hard. I started out by listing maybe 15 words and narrowing it down. I decided to go with ampersand. Now, ampersand is the word for the and sign.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn that word till I was 18, 19. And when I learnt the word for it, it felt like a kind of secret. And I've gone on to be really interested in language and linguistics, so I like anything sort of slightly technical like that. I love the thing itself. I think it really reminds you of old letters, and there's something really personal about it. I use it a lot if I'm doing handwritten stuff. It's quick and it's fluid and it's personal. But I also just love the way the word sounds. This is where it gets really kind of linguistically geeky, but obviously you've got the sort of nice repetition of the ah sound, ampersand, so this kind of circular, it sort of feels like the movement of the symbol itself to me, like
Hmm.
quite onomatopoeic.
Love it.
And the M and the P are both what you call bilabial, so you make them both with your lips, but the end of the word, the N and the D, are both alveolar, which means you make them with your tongue against your teeth, sand. So it just has this unity about it that I think words rarely have. So I love the sound, I love the meaning, I love the kind of slightly exclusive, oh, this is a technical word that not everybody uses all the time. That kind
That
of
is the
thing.
best description for why that's your favourite word we've had yet, without a
Okay.
doubt. And also because I love the basis of that too. I mean, my favourite word, which is incandescent, is
Hmm.
because of the way it sounds.
Yeah.
It kind of finishes in a very clean line, but starts kind of quite muddled at the beginning of that. So, what are some of the words that didn't make that were in the running but didn't make the number one spot?
Well, I worry about this in terms of my own ego because I really like the sounds that are in my name, like the ah sound. I like a lot. So I found myself listing other kind of language words like assonance and anaphora, but also, other languages. I love Italian words like cantabile, which just means like sung, sing, song like. Um, so yeah, I haven't got the full list in front of me,
No,
but
no,
it's
no.
things
That's fair enough.
like that.
I wasn't going to ask you to run through this. Although you did preempt a question that I was about to ask, and you may have given the answer, or it might be something else, which I haven't prepped you for. Which
Okay.
is but that's only because of learning that you teach English as a foreign language. But what's your favourite foreign word?
That is very hard. There's a word in German, Waldeinsamkeit, which means like the loneliness of being in a forest. I think that's a really beautiful word.
I mean, that I love that word. I
Yeah.
love the description too. And thank you very much for the English lesson as well. I feel that this is going to be a very educational conversation. Um,
Oh, maybe.
what's your least favourite word? And I'm going to ask you what your least favourite foreign word is, just as a heads up.
Oh, yeah, that's hard.
That
I
might be
nearly
hard.
went for a foreign word because I thought, well, maybe it's a word I find hard to pronounce. But I thought, well, that's on me, really. I could practice and get better at it. I'll try not to do this with every question, but with this one, I had all these different categories. I was thinking, okay, there's cutesy words I find really annoying, but I'm reluctant to include those because I bet people I know use them and don't know how much I hate them. Um, there's certain swear words that I find really abhorrent, but I hate them so much I don't want to say them.
Fair enough.
And then there's kind of words that we think of as harmless, but I think are harmful. So the word I've gone with is bossy. Um, Bossy is a word that is almost exclusively used to describe women and girls. And I totally get it.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that, but yeah, you're right.
Sometimes people are too assertive or clumsy in their leadership. But I think that there's a real danger that if it's used about girls when they're young, um, it can have the opposite effect and it cause them to become a little bit too reserved. And there's other words too, things like feisty and sassy is usually only used about black women. So I just want all those words to be banned, basically.
Brilliant description of that. And do you have a favourite foreign word?
A favourite, like
Sorry,
this.
a least favourite.
Hmm. It's very hard. Very hard. I'm not sure I can give you that one, to be honest. I mean, it's sort of basically anything I find hard to pronounce. I've been trying to learn some Chinese recently, and I think most of those words are my least favourite because it's just so challenging.
I like the fact that I prepped you for what your favourite and least favourite words are in one language, and then just drop a bombshell on you that I want to know your favourite and least favourite word in all the other languages. But
Yeah, yeah. I'm not
don't.
actually fluent in all the other languages,
Oh,
so
okay. Well, that's a disappointment. So when you're writing, are you quite um, what I'm thinking of? So, firstly, what comes first, the lyrics or the melody or the music?
so if it's happening very naturally, that sort of magical moment when a song comes to you, most common for me would be a chorus kind of landing. So the words and the melody in a sort of bit of a hook or a refrain landing all at once. I don't think you can really separate words from melody because there's a lot to do with the stress patterns of language and the vowel sounds and how they work with certain notes. But if I'm sort of making myself sit and write a song, which I'm trying to do more of rather than waiting for inspiration, I do tend to start with words. I've been writing a lot of songs over the last few years about postcards, so I would do some free writing in response to the image. And then it really happens in stages for me. I kind of have to separate myself from all of the output. I have to go back later and read the words again as if they're not mine, and then kind of sculpt into them to create more of a song-like structure. Yeah, but the music has come first, just not that often.
So the reason I ask that question is because when you are writing the lyrics, how protective are you about certain words? How hard do you look into the lines you've written to try and find whether that particular word fits for a number of reasons, not just because it grammatically makes sense? And you know, I'm curious, because you're such a wordsmith, it's interesting to understand how the words of the song then are constructed.
Yeah, I think the reason I do the kind of free writing thing is because I'm so interested in that stuff that it can stop me doing anything. You know, I think it can be a real block. So you almost have to put on your creative brain and let yourself play, and then come back with an editor's brain afterwards and fix that stuff. But I do think just from years of reading and listening to good music and all of that stuff, I have a natural way with language, maybe more than some people. But I think I'd rather sort of get it wrong first and then go back and fix it. But yeah, rhythm's very important to me. Like, it should sort of, I think you notice things like the rhythm if they're wrong. Not, wrong sounds awful, but if they're unnatural somehow. And that can be great. Like, you know, I love people like Regina Spektor who do weird things, and then maybe that's meant to be part of it. But if it's standing out because it jars, that's what you want to avoid, I guess. Things like rhyme, I'm quite happy just to sort of see what crops up. I often just sort of like rhyme stuff within a line and then not at the end of a line. And it's a balance between being playful and sort of following certain rules, I guess.
I think the idea of just writing it and editing it later is a wonderful lesson too, for kind of links into the question earlier about how do you start the process. So thank you for that. What turns you on?
So my answer to this is people who are good at listening. And I don't necessarily count myself in that. I think that, you know, amongst family and friends, I'll totally admit I can be the person who interrupts or who's like thinking of the next thing to say rather than really listening. And I think, you know, if I think back over good conversations I've had in the past, or people that I've gotten on with really well when I first met them, it's the thing that they're actually interested in what you're saying and they're actually listening, and that you're both kind of in the moment, as it were, which is quite rare these days with all of us checking our phones and stuff like that.
So I guess how would you know if you're in a conversation that they are listening? What's your qualification for that?
I think it's quite hard to put your finger on. Sometimes it's just this feeling of chemistry, which I think is almost not real. I think chemistry is both people actually putting an effort into the interaction. Obviously, you've got to be maybe compatible as people as well. And I'm really not talking like romantically at all. I'm just saying with anybody, there's that thing of if you're both really listening, then when they say the next thing, I realise how meta this is and how under pressure I'm making you feel now.
No, it's all right. I was already under pressure at the start.
When they say the next thing, then you know, you can hear that they have actually been paying attention, and then it keeps bouncing off in a really nice organic way.
So how am I doing?
I think you're doing well. Yeah.
Okay.
The key thing is, it's just, I mean, I think Zoom is making people do this more as well, because you sort of have to wait until someone stopped talking. Whereas in real life, it's easy.
Which is so against my instincts.
Yeah, me too. I think, I'm not saying I'm good at this necessarily, but I want to be better. There's a good TED talk, I think it's called 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. And the woman in it explains how this is a very natural problem that we have because we're able to process more words than people can say during like a minute. So you're always filling in the gaps with all your own words. It takes a lot of effort to sort of just listen to the one thing at one time.
I'm definitely going to search that video, that talk out. But I also like, because I'm often saying, because I deliver social media and digital marketing training as my paid job, and I'm frequently saying that you'll be more interesting if you listen to what people are saying. So it's a fascinating, but almost feels slightly odd, at odds with each other when you're saying to be more interested, you've got to say less. And of course, if both people did that, it would make for a very dull conversation.
Yeah, it's such a difficult one. I think it sort of depends on the person. Like, if you know that you're someone who has a tendency to jump in and talk a lot, like me, then the advice to talk less is great. But then I've worked with some people who need a push to sort of get involved and value their own contribution.
Well, you haven't jumped in and interrupted so far, so maybe we should thank Zoom for that, as you say. So what turns you off?
The opposite, people
Yeah,
who
I had a
can't
feeling you were going to say that. I don't know why. I just...
yeah. To be honest, that's where I started from. I thought, okay, figuring out what turns me on kind of comes from what turns me off. So, and I think listening means so many things. I'm going to give an example. It feels a bit dangerous because the person might identify themselves, but I don't think so. I was at an open mic night a few years ago, and this guy, I think he's very friendly and very nice, and sort of saying he liked my music. But we ended up on the bus together on the way home, and the whole thing felt like a performance of how clever and interesting he was. And he literally started getting books out of his bag to show me what he'd been reading, and there was this sort of flow from him, and it was so heartbreaking because I thought this person's trying to impress me, but I would be much more impressed if he took a breath and asked me one thing about myself, or kind of knew his audience before telling me all these things, because there was a lot of mansplaining, if I'm honest, a lot of sort of explaining what literature was to someone who's, studied it and taught it and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's when people think that having conversations is just kind of detailing all their achievements to you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I
One of my
share
teachers
your...
used to call it willy waving.
Well, no, you're going to have to go into more here. I'd not heard it. I'd not heard that as a description for it.
I think that was just her suggesting that it's often a masculine thing to do.
No, fair enough. Fair
Um,
enough. That, I mean, talking about throwing, as I'm looking for the next question on here, just thrown a curveball right at me. That was it. Thank you for that. And actually, talking about using your ears and the impact that can have on how someone feels about you. And you're right. It's professionally. It's all areas of communication. I think it links in very brilliantly to the next question, which is, what sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of a cat purring.
Why? I might sound like a stupid question because I think many people go, yeah, that makes sense. But I'm curious to know your reason.
I think it's fascinating because it's a sign. I mean, I'm obsessed with cats. That's what you need to know, and I don't have one, so I'm sort of extra
Not that
excited
obsessed
to
then.
see them. Sorry?
Not that obsessed then.
It's just not allowed on my tenancy
Oh,
agreement.
fair enough.
Can't wait till I own property. um, no, I mean, more obsessed than I would be if I had one, I think. So it's the sound of the animal feeling very comfortable. So that's interesting when you go back to the listening thing of it's a sign that the cat's comfortable with you, which is really lovely in terms of the kind of bond. And I think it's just a really lovely kind of warm, low sound. I think often the sounds people dislike are quite sort of sharp, whereas this
Mm.
it's very sort of, it just seems to match the softness of the fur of the cat as well. But
There's
I
a
love other
sound of
cat noises. Sorry?
there's an absolute sound of contentment, um,
Exactly.
which no, I can see that. Although oddly enough,
Are
the
you
next
a cat
question,
person or a dog
no,
person?
no, I'm more of a dog person. If you ask me what sound or noise I hate, it would be a cat screeching.
Hmm.
So I think we may well differ in this area here, and I suspect your answer might not be a cat related to the next question, which is what sound or noise do you hate?
Well, I've gone for, and I can't even describe this without feeling uncomfortable, the sound of a fork or a knife scratching against a plate. So if somebody's cutting their food and either they go too hard or it slips and it makes this kind of nails on a blackboard sound, it physically makes me cringe. I hate it.
There's a now I don't know if it still exists, but only because I remember I think it was Chris Evans talking to this cafe owner in Brighton who had a very strict policy about this. So that if, for example, when you were stirring your cup of tea, if you made too many connections with the cup, then they would pretty much kick you out.
That's
Yeah,
so
they were
funny though,
brutal.
because I think that sounds quite pleasant. I think a sort of teaspoon against a teacup is quite pretty. But there's something about the speed and the force of the kind of knife against the plate that's
Hmm.
it makes more of a screech, I guess.
I also find it impossible, as I did after I heard it, to stir a cup of tea without making connection with the end. There's way too much mental involvement in that than there should be. You have kindly agreed to perform a couple of songs, but just before we go into the first one, you released a line during the lockdown a couple
Yeah.
of months ago, which is a wonderful song, and the video to accompany it as well is great. But does this mean that we've got some material coming from you soon?
Yes. So the full story, which links to the song, is that I'm working on an album, and I have been since maybe November. I've been working on the set of songs for a lot longer. So the songs are all about postcards, and I started this as a project to get myself writing more. Um, but I eventually sort of had enough of these postcard songs, and by postcard songs, I just mean I wrote about the image or the place I got it from, or the message, or all of the above. And then we finally got into the studio in early March. Um, and did a very useful week. This is me at Gladeside Recordings with Dan Wild, who is a fantastic singer-songwriter. Um, Luckily, we had a really productive week of laying down all the arrangements for everything and some final parts, because after that, lockdown hit. So it's quite good because we've got a record of what we want to do, digital version of the drums, digital version of the cello, whatever it might be. Um, but I was planning to release this in a whole different way, maybe release the album this autumn, maybe release some EPs leading up to it. I wasn't entirely sure. But the only song that was ready was A Line, because it was only vocals and piano and it was all mixed and we were happy with it. And this to me was one of the most recent ones I'd written, and I felt it was deeply personal and quite exposed. I was planning to hide it at the end of the album, basically. And then
When
my
you say
friend,
hide it, what do you mean? As in one of those ones where you have a final song, then a bit of a gap, and then it pops in, so it's not even listed, or
not
which I know
necessarily.
artists used to do quite a bit.
I think that's so much harder these days. Probably it was just going to be the last track. So featured, but only for the kind of dedicated fans, I
Right.
guess. But then Dan, my producer, suggested releasing it as a single. And I was quite nervous about this, but he pointed out that the words I use in the song, the chorus is basically there's a line running through everything, and it's a lot of messages of sort of connection. He said that really linked to the time we were going through with lockdown, and I liked that because I think a lot of people have sort of written a lockdown song as a thing, whereas I just had written something in September that maybe spoke to the time we were in. And then, yeah, these friends of mine made a stop motion video, which we wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the lockdown. The limitations really sparked more creativity, which was great.
I genuinely thought you wrote it during the lockdown because it fitted. Talk about foresight in terms of capturing the mood of when it's released. So I'm grateful for your producer to convince you to release it.
Yeah.
So what song are we going to hear from you now?
We're going to hear one of the first postcard songs that I wrote.
I love
I
a
started
concept.
by...
I do love a concept album.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't ever intending to do one really, but it just, it started as a tool and then built into an album. So I started when I was on this songwriting retreat that I mentioned earlier, and he wasn't one of the main tutors, but Boo Hewardine was there as a guest, and he'd written on this album with Duke Special, Under the Dark Cloth. It's all about photographs. And so I liked that idea, but I thought I'll add to it, because if you've got text on the postcard, you've got even more material, basically. So when I got back, I started writing a postcard song every week. I didn't keep them all. But someone I met on the course, a guy called Louis, sent me a postcard really early on. Now, he's an art student, but he sent me the most badly designed postcard of a castle in Scotland with the word Scotland on it in terrible, word art font, And then very gloomy lyrics on the back, because I think he was sort of a bit fed up of winter in Glasgow. So the disclaimer is I've never been to Glasgow. Apologies for the tuning noises.
All right, you're a musician.
So it's sort of from the image and from the words he sent me, and it's a kind of, a message to my friend Louis.
Lovely.
I lost your postcard was waiting for me in the end. Compact capital letters scroll in monochrome, tucked inside a study frame. This ink has traveled a long, long way to talk to me, with a regal profile watching over. No storms could weather these words away. And I hate to think of you alone in Glasgow, holding on to edges, letting go. You're not the only one alone in Glasgow. So take this city by the hand. A solid structure can withstand the wind, no matter how weak you may think you are. The beauty of the city's in its bruises. The things we love get torn apart. So go on, beat your drum deep. The fireworks shine bright tonight. Don't resist these concrete walls surrounding you. Home can be a different size. And I hate to think of you alone in Glasgow, holding on to edges, letting go. You're not the only one alone in Glasgow. So take this city by the hand. And I hate to think of you alone in Glasgow, holding on to edges, letting go. You're not the only one alone in Glasgow. So take this city by the hand. So take this city by the hand.
That was absolutely beautiful. Do you know what? I kind of listened to that, feeling that Glasgow became a bit of metaphor for how many people might be feeling in life as well. You know,
Yeah,
to
exactly.
kind of, which I think is just kind of adds an, you know, an even, yeah, different angle to it. But it's a very beautiful song, and you have such a rich sounding voice as well that complements your writing so much.
Thank you. I was a little bit worried because my interface kept kind of flashing red, so hope it wasn't too loud. I
No,
might turn it down next time.
no, it came across very well from where I'm
Judgment
sitting.
from the interface is a bit much sometimes, you know.
Just, you know, it all relies on data, not human experience. So what does so when can we expect this album to be out?
It's a very good question. Full disclosure, I think the original plan was to release in November, but we've kind of got a bit of a backlog now because we've not been recording it. I think early next year is the plan, but I'm hoping to release another single. I'm thinking of perhaps that song because it'll be a very different sound to Align. We've got on Alone in Glasgow, you know, drums and bass and a whole sort of band sound around it, which is fun as a contrast. But you give me a good excuse to plug my crowdfunder.
Far away.
So I was planning to do this anyway, and it's given me something to do with the album in this time when I'm not actually in the studio, which is so frustrating. I think we are hopefully going to start recording again next month. But I've got a page on Crowdfunder. It's quite long, so the easiest thing might be to go to my website, which is annahester.com, ANNAHESTER. But if you search Anna Hester is making an album on Crowdfunder, then it's up there. And I talk more about the postcards, and there's some nice clips of us in the studio, and lots of rewards, as is the case with these fun websites.
Hang on, I'm just making a note of this. Well, I love artists who crowdfund. I think not only do you end up with this beautiful piece of art that you can listen to that might not have happened without that financial investment, but secondly, I think from a listener and from a fan, you feel like there's an extra, not ownership as such, like an extra emotional investment into the album as well. So I wish you every success with that. I have it loaded here on my phone, and we'll have a look at that afterwards, but it sounds like you're going great guns with it at the moment, but could definitely do with some more. So if you are listening to this, then please go and help Anna out, because I want to hear the album and it's all about me. So what is your favourite curse word?
So I picked this quite carefully. For context, as I keep giving you, I really hated swear words as a child. To the extent that I had like a swear jar for the rest of the family. I don't want to out them here, but they swear a fair amount.
Well, there's your crowdfunding solution, right?
Yeah, exactly. I should do that again. But I think two things have made me swear more in life. One is becoming a teacher, because you can't do it in the classroom, so then you sort of let it all out in the staff room. And two is becoming a driver. Like, I would never lean out the window and swear at someone, but I say awful things under my breath. It's a funny thing. But I've gone for something different, because if there's a word I'm actually fond of, this is a German swear word that my brother invented. Apologies to any.
They all count?
It's not in the dictionary, but it's kind of logical, and you can do this portmanteau with German words quite easily. So the word is Scheißgewordene, and you might know the word Scheiße.
Yeah.
So Scheißgewordene kind of means a person who has become shit. And it's quite judgmental. It's sort of saying you were good before, but now. But you can sort of use it to describe situations as well. So
give me a sentence that would include the word, and so an English sentence that would include that you would then fit that word into.
The thing is, I think we use it in the family more as a kind of expression of exasperation.
Right.
So if something goes wrong or someone annoys you, and to be honest, it's usually in a jokey way, you go, oh, shut up now. You know, in the same way someone might go, oh, bastard.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Excellent. It will, obviously, as a result of the popularity of this chat, it will appear in a German dictionary within a year or two, I don't doubt.
Thank you. That's my hope, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever swear on this, in your songwriting?
No, basically. When I was younger, I definitely wrote a couple of things with sweary bits in them, and I enjoyed learning other people's songs, but I think it sort of didn't really fit with my brand very much. And I kind of like, I mean, I think some of my songs are quite dark, so it's not always family friendly in that regard, but I like having stuff that I feel like I could probably be put anywhere and perform. And in fact, with the song Align, a friend of mine thanked me because her niece liked the song, and she said, oh, it's so hard to find music that my niece is like allowed to listen to.
That's quite sad. That is quite sad to think that is the case, although, yeah.
Well, I think when I was small, like the big pop bands were quite, I mean, you know, there were weird things around Britney Spears and people like that, but bands like S Club 7, there was something so innocent about it, and the subject matter and all of that stuff. And now I think, yeah, it's often highly sexualized and highly adult, even the stuff that's meant to be for quite small children. So I'm not saying I want to be a kids performer, but I think I feel the same about comedy. I think you don't really need to swear. It can be a replacement for doing something a bit more intelligent. So I think it can be great as a bit of impact, but I think it should be used sparingly, basically.
It's like, so this is going to be terrible for anyone listening to the audio version of this, because I'm about to highlight a book, but I'll discuss the title of it. But I feel like there is more versions of art where swearing is used to kind of make something stand out. So there is the very famous Mark Manson book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is a brilliant book. Mm-hmm. And obviously, given that it's in the title and the basis of it, it appears throughout. but I wondered if that needed to be the case, because again, I'm not a prude, and I have a fairly filthy language when I want to, but at the same time, I also know that kids walk through bookshops, and although this isn't aimed at the child, they're going to see it and ask questions about it. There's another one by Dan Meredith, who wrote a business book called How to Be Fucking Awesome. And again, the same rule applies. Did you need to do that? I don't. So yeah, I think where people add it in songs, if I was on a political rant, if I was talking about how my life is, feeling, I'm angry and I want to throw an angry word in there that might not be acceptable for young ears, I think that's absolutely right and okay to do. But when people do it, I feel for the sake of it, I get quite annoyed by that.
Although I think I also should add that I think sometimes, maybe not even within songs, but between songs, women, as you say, particularly women who might look like me, fairly feminine, fairly young looking, hopefully still, are judged more harshly for it. And, I have had some discussions with other female singer-songwriters who swear more on stage, and who've been really in sort of criticised for it. And I think that becomes a problem. If you're expected to be sort of ladylike in some old-fashioned way, I think that, it's just each to their own is kind of how it should be. If you're in a sort of over-18s bar and you're swearing between songs, I think it's fine. And it shouldn't be any different for women and men, basically.
If you're performing at an 11-year-old's birthday, probably less so. I realise as well that this conversation has suddenly made this unacceptable for young ears as well. So the irony isn't lost on me there, but but it's the question, so I'm asking it. Right, next question. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a theatre director. I went, as a child, I went through stages. I wanted to be a painter, a fashion designer, which I don't have the skill for at all. And then I was really passionate for a while about being either an actor or a director. And I nearly applied for a university course in theatre direction, but then I chickened out and went for something more general, English.
Right.
But I loved drama at school, and the first chance I got to direct people rather than just act, I found that so exciting. As I said earlier, I don't like the word bossy, but I do like being in control, I'll tell you that.
I think that's the mentor in you as well, perhaps, that comes out there. So let's flip it on the other side then. What profession would you not like to do?
I've gone for be in the Navy.
Any role?
Any role.
Is it just because you don't like the sea?
I don't like being on boats. I don't like the sea. I thought, well, I wouldn't want to be a trawler, but I think the fact that it also involves combat terrifies me. If conscription was a thing, I would dump all my feminism and say, no, I'm a lady, I don't want to go. So I think, war terrifies me, and being on a boat, and even just working in the outdoors. I struggle to see how construction workers, cope as soon as the rain hits.
No.
I'm a bit of a wimp, basically.
I often feel when you say construction workers, it's the ones who work on roads, and you drive past them in this horrible driving rain, trying to block out the swearing that you're doing in the next car. And then you see, road workers on the side getting absolutely drenched, and you do feel for them. You absolutely do. So last question from this list of 10 then is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
This question is so funny to me because I'm agnostic, I guess, is the best word for it. But I think the first part of the sentence is sort of undermined by the second part. If heaven exists, and then I start picturing something. And then what would God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? God's anthropomorphic, and there are gates to heaven. Like, for me, that undermines the whole beauty of heaven. But if we're going for the stereotypical white bearded guy and the literal gates, I think just something like, they're all here. Because I think, the only appeal would be being reunited with those people who've moved on, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. Although I've also suddenly worked out that you might be the worst person ever to tell a joke to. Because if I was to tell a joke like a duck walks into a pub, you go, well, why would a duck go into a pub for a start? And also they come under the English language and, constructive, they don't have the power of cognitive thought.
Terrible. No, I promise, or at least I hope that I'm not that guy. But I just think it's so funny because I think one of the reasons many people don't believe in heaven is because they think it's this prescriptive cartoon. And
Hmm.
actually, maybe it should be this really fluid, whatever would be comforting to you kind of thing. But you're right, I do hate that when people do that, so I apologize.
No, it's all right. No, I think adding context to it is brilliant. And although I'm just curious, the agnostic side of it, I'm not curious about people who are agnostic, more to the point that I never truly understand the difference between someone who's agnostic or atheist.
So, my understanding, without consulting a dictionary, as I'm wont to do, um, an atheist, theist is means like God. So an atheist means anti-God, no belief in God or any God.
Right.
An agnostic, I think, is somebody who is undecided on the matter and is open to the idea of religion but isn't of a particular faith.
I think that's the best description that I've heard. I have looked it up and I've tried to understand it better, but I think you've summed that up perfectly. You are most definitely a teacher. It's I know we're going to have another song for you in a moment, but I loved this conversation. I mean, I feel like I've learned quite a bit as well, and it's wonderful to get to know you a bit better and to know the person behind some really beautiful, sometimes dark, but really enjoyable songs to listen to. And I can't wait for the new album. I will be on the crowdfunding page. And when people do go to find you, where do you tend to direct them to? Do you direct them to Bandcamp or Spotify, or do you just direct people to your website?
I think the website's good in that it links to everything else, but I mean, following me on social media is always a big help. It's a sort of sad truth is that's what we need these days. And
Mm.
I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and Bandcamp is really important because we all spend a lot of time, myself included, streaming music. But if you want to support an artist, then Bandcamp's the place to go.
And fair play to Bandcamp for release for having some days where they weren't taking, all the money went to the artist too. So
Definitely.
well done then, Spotify. You can learn a thing or two.
Yeah.
What's the second song we're going to hear from you?
So the second song is, I think it's the most recent postcard song I've written. So it's the newest song on the album. And I chose this one because it's another one that's quite a literal postcard song and actually involves another person, which was always my aim with the project. And I've talked to you about my teaching. So this was when I was working at a language school, and a colleague came in. These places can be very sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Transient, because people work for short periods and whatever. And a colleague came in and he just sort of said, "Oh, what's everyone doing tonight?" And I did that classic cynical thing of saying, "Oh, I'm going to try and write a song," but kind of apologising as I said it. Think, "Oh, he's going to think I'm a wanker who writes songs." Oh, another swear, sorry.
Yeah, no one saw that one coming.
Anyway, but this guy ended up being so engaged, good at listening, to tie everything together for you, and asked me about the project. And the fact that he was interested gave me more motivation that evening. But more than that, he went to Amsterdam for the weekend and brought me back a postcard. And on the postcard, he wrote about his whole weekend with his friends. And it gave me a new song because he was interested enough to give me a postcard, which felt like a kind of something to be accountable against. And just that open-minded, open-hearted thing that I think we don't get enough, especially in this country, of someone saying, "Oh, that's great, can you tell me more about your project?" So yeah, it's a song for Jack, and it's called A Boat Called Friendship, because he stayed on a boat in Amsterdam called Friendship. So I think it's the cheesiest title I've ever come up with, but it fits what the postcard actually was all
I don't
about.
think there's anything wrong with cheesy, quite frankly.
Yeah, and in a way I think it liberated me to write something a little bit more sentimental because he was helping me to sort of get rid of that cynical bit, I suppose, that lurks in me. And I won't say too much, but this is another one that I've noticed since lockdown has taken on new kind of meanings. So see if you can spot any of that. Send me a postcard from 9 years ago. We took the train through the undersea tunnel to Amsterdam. We sat on a boat and we sang madrigals. We bought vintage clothes. I rode on your shoulders, and like a child I saw the world. I saw this and thought of you, of your company. I saw this and thought of you 9 years ago on a boat called friendship. Send me a postcard from somebody new. I'm looking backwards, but when you are steering, you must look forward. I hardly know you, I know you are kind. Kindness in strangers is so hard to find when you avert your eyes. I saw this and thought of you, of your eyes, of your smile, of your company. I saw this and thought of you. 1 week ago you showed me friendship. Memories piled up in boxes so we can forget to remember. And we don't stop to count the years because the distance is hard. The distance is hard. The distance is hard. The distance is hard. I saw this and thought of you, of your eyes, of your smile, of your company. I saw this and thought of you 9 years ago on a boat called friendship. Send me a postcard from 9 years ago. We took the train through the undersea tunnel to Amsterdam.
Wow, wow, wonderful. And I completely see the idea of it being relatable to the time we're in at the moment. I think, you know, especially that line, kindness in strangers is so hard to find when you avert your eyes. I think it's a wonderful song. I can't wait till the album is released, and I'm glad that we've got these two performances to keep us going until then.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. How did your Me to Read as you performed that one? I mean, it sounded great from me.
That one was okay. You might have noticed a little bit of moving backwards.
Yeah, I did. And the smile on your face as you did it as well.
It's such a funny thing. I've gained a lot of confidence in the last few weeks, but I think being asked to do all your sounds on your own remotely like this, it's just so strange because it just never sounds the same right here as it does the other side. There's a lot of faith involved, isn't there?
There is. Well, have faith that you sounded amazing, both in the performances, but also in your stories as well. So thank you so much, Anna. And I can't wait till we're back and you can come to St Ives and perform as part of the St Ives folk sessions as well. I think that would be great for more of the town to hear you too.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
But until then, yes, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with the rest of the new album. I hope you can get it recorded and we can all enjoy it when it's out. And thank you for your time again.
Thank you so much for having me.